All right. Welcome to Rich Conversations. We have another special episode lined up today because we have Vlad Yashin back on the show from Hamburg, Germany. Welcome back.
Hi, Rich. Nice to see you again.
Now, why don't you reintroduce yourself? You were on episode, I think, like 143 or 146. You're a data scientist. Why don't you reintroduce yourself for listeners and viewers?
Sure. Basically, I'm 23 years old from Belarus by birth. I'm currently living in Hamburg, in Germany. I'm doing my bachelor here in technical economics, and uh, right now I'm doing my internship at Avanade, a big joint venture of Microsoft as a data scientist. And yeah, I have a lot of hobbies. I've started fencing, by the way, since last time we spoke.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, amazing sport, amazing sport. So yeah, that's a brief introduction into who I am.
Okay, so while we're on it, tell me a little bit more about fencing.
Um, so uh, since last time we spoke, my biggest hobby, let's say, turned out into my full-time employment at Avanade right now. Not full-time employment, but I got a job in it. And I've decided to find a new hobby just because to empty your mind and to focus on something else other than work or sitting in front of the computer. And yeah, um, I've opened YouTube once. I guess it was Olympia in Japan, and I've seen like a video of a saber fencing, and I was like,
Okay.
"Whoa, this stuff is cool!" Like, I mean, this stuff is something about this combat sports and a lot of involvement in it. So researched a couple of fencing clubs in Hamburg. Went to the first training and invited a friend of mine. Yeah, and since that time, since August, I guess, or yeah, end of July, August, I'm full in it 2 times a week. Yesterday I was fencing, so wonderful.
So what do you love most about fencing? I imagine you have to have pretty great footwork, or it helps you with your footwork.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. For me, the most complicated part is uh, all the rules that come into the
Okay.
fencing, because till now I didn't get all the rules because it's very complicated. It's about the priority, who is attacking, who is defending, a lot of footwork as well. You have to be very agile in your movements, and the most important, you have to keep the control of your body and your mind for 100%. And if you transport it, like, to the historical times where people were fencing, like really fencing, like,
Yeah.
uh so then you understand, okay, I will think about my job or some issues with, I don't know, apartment search or whatever, because I'm fencing. Otherwise, like historically, like if go back in the days, you would die. You cannot think about, you have to be fully in control of your body, your mind, your saber, your weapon. Like, it's the most beautiful part of it because it empties your mind like I've never experienced it before.
Mm, interesting. Yeah, that's something I've definitely been thinking a lot about. It's so healthy for an individual to just like clear your mind, whether it's going for a walk or finding whatever activity that does that. My question for you, okay, so how did fencing become a sport? Like, and when did like society shift between, like, did fencing exist in the 18th century in France when everybody was carrying around like swords and stuff? Like, what was that about?
um yeah, so literally, uh fencing developed with a time, as far as I know, uh since the Roman Empire, like
Yeah.
big uh this huge empire where everyone was not fencing, but fighting with swords and stuff like that. Somehow it developed to the fencing you was talking about, like in the France, and later on it somehow developed to the fencing that we have right now. And for example, yesterday I've learned like insane fact about fencing, that in Germany, for example, in saber fencing, women were not allowed to fence saber till 1990. So basically,
that's recent.
Yeah, 30 years ago, they were allowed for the first time to do saber fencing. I mean, there are another two weapons, AP and one more, I forgot. So, and that's insane. It's like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So
it's wild. So how do the skills, so you're learning on this particular sword, if someone handed you like, like a saber from the 18th century, would you be able, do those skills translate right away? Would you be really good with a sword?
I'm not really sure, but I guess that also all the characteristics of the swords has changed really a lot. And there is a big difference between, like this sport kind of fencing and fencing that we're talking about, like in a historical way, where people like really fighting till the first blood or something like that.
Yeah.
And I can imagine to fence with it, but you have to understand that there are also rules in a sport fencing that we are learning, and they're developing continuously. Like I guess every 1 year, some rules are being canceled, some rules are coming up, and you have to come up with it. But if we talk about real proper fighting fencing, that's another story, because it's not about rules, it's about your skills and about your empty mind, like really like this called art of being in the fight right now in this moment. So it's
wow, that's awesome. Good for you. Good for you.
Thank you
doing that. Well, we're talking about the mind right now. Why don't we talk about this article you wrote on Medium on statistical bias? I read it, and why don't you summarize the essentials of statistical bias and why it's important?
Yeah, sure. I'll try to do it. So basically, that's something I've been curious about recently. And that's something as for me, I mean, bias is nothing else as an systematic error. Systematic error, if we talk about bias in a statistical way, it's a systematic error, or like, tendency during the data collection process or that data processing, steps. It can be easily transferred to our everyday life and to the way we think, just because it affects our judgments and our opinion making. And somehow I was reading about it a lot, and I've decided to to summarize it in my article on Medium. Yeah, so if we talk about it, about the importance of it, it's definitely how we can be a better human beings and how we can develop ourselves to a better humans, to be more rational, to be more precise, to be. It's also a very important step to avoid discrimination, for example, to avoid such stuff as, I don't know, society polarization, for example. That's and yeah, that's a small summarization of it.
Something I find, I'm very pro rational people. People should be critically thinking people, but it's not necessarily sexy when you talk about it.
Of course, I can give you a small idea why it's important. I mean, to my mind, for everyone. So there are different types of statistical bias that can be transferred on a everyday life. So basically, there are like recall bias, confirmation bias, selection bias, and plenty of them. Statistics teaches you to do right things and to do things right. Like if in terms of bias, for example, when we're talking about it. And it's very important to learn about uncomfortable things to ensure that all parties of a conversation are involved into the conversation, for example, just to ensure that the data distribution, like ensured, let's say.
Yeah.
Also, constructive feedback is very important if we're talking about bias. And yeah, I mean, if the biggest example would be, I guess in the US, there is such thing as society polarization. I mean, a lot of people are getting left, a lot of people are getting right, and there is way less people in the middle that, you know, try to handle these different opinions out there. And that's nothing else than a confirmation bias. For example, if we're talking about Facebook feed, people, like, confirmation bias is nothing else as you confirm your beliefs, and for people are lazy and people are irrational, and for many of them it's way more easy to, you know, to see what they want, what they want to see, and answer on a question that only support their beliefs, and even if it's not true. So, and that's, for example, how Facebook feed algorithms, like on a larger scale, developed. And let's say,
because they want to keep you on the platform and keep using it so they can
exactly,
sell your attention to advertisers.
Exactly. And that's the biggest paradox to my mind. There's a lot of easy accessible information out there, really a lot. You can Google everything you want. And if we get more information, it gets way more difficult to differentiate between real true or real false.
Yeah.
You know? And that's why it's important to learn about such thing as, for example, confirmation bias. And it's the biggest thing for me, in my personal perspective, that impacts the society and its future, also
Right.
our everyday life, you know.
Mm.
And yeah, it's important to build, for example, more like the fuller picture of the outer world. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I have you on. So we can like better understand these concepts so we can apply them in our lives, be a better human, be a better contributor to our own communities. And then that, with more people doing this, the world becomes a better place. So
Exactly.
why don't we dive into some of these biases? Which one should we be most aware about during our like everyday life, going about our everyday life? Which bias should we be most aware about?
To my mind, it's selection bias. And if we're talking about selection bias, it's nothing else that people choose the easiest data they can access or they have access to. So basically, if you want to read something about, I don't know, the last news, hottest topics out there, for example, somewhere in Africa, you go on your, I don't know, Instagram or Facebook or whatever, you Google it, but you don't try to get the fuller picture, for example, using some historical data or the development of different, you know, such thing as poverty level or I don't know, hunger level in Africa to understand, is it better right now that it was, or is it like going worse? So for me, yeah, selection bias is definitely one of the most most important that we should be aware of.
So
For
you
example,
could, oh, go ahead.
for example, also, let's take an example. If I'll ask you like what people think about, I don't know, Joe Biden as a president of the
Mhm.
United States, probably everything that will come up to your mind will be people who posted or who you were speaking to on a social media somewhere. But the biggest problem with it, it's unrepresentative. It's
Yeah.
something people like between 18 and 30 who are extroverts posting daily on a Facebook or on Instagram or on other social media. You see it, you think about what they think, but there are a lot of people who are 50, 60, 70, 80 that are not included in this sampling and in this representation of the whole population.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem. You choose the the easiest accessible data out there without touching, you know, these edge cases, these other specific points that are also important for the bigger picture of the population.
So the selection bias is essentially, it's tempting to just grab the most accessible or like the easiest data. And as an individual, you have to think this is just like one part of the data. Like, say, for instance, you Google something, people are most likely looking at the top 3 things. Are you looking into this other, are you going multiple pages deep to find information? Are you going on like, are you looking at like economic statistics and GDP and just like all these other factors, or just like whatever's the top headline or the most sensational kind of story, the juiciest, I don't know. Being aware about that is a good thing to know, right?
Exactly. I mean, in some simple cases, it shouldn't be a big problem. But if we are talking about, I don't know, society development or some very hot topics, some political topics or geopolitical topics, that's definitely where you have to think about selection bias and maybe do a bit more research than you should have done, like without knowing that there is such a thing as selection bias.
And perhaps hold off on having an opinion until you gather more data and
Exactly.
process that. Yeah.
Exactly. Not like based on the top three results by Googling my question.
So then, of the statistical biases, which one do you think we should be most aware of as a society creating the future?
There are, as I've mentioned, many of them. To my mind, the biggest can, as a challenge for the society, can be a confirmation bias, and that's what I was talking about. Because people tend to see what they want to see, and answer answer on the questions based on what supports their beliefs and their opinions, their ideas, and that's basically the most important bias that we should be aware of. As I've said, the polarization in a society, like the first thing that comes up to my mind every time when I'm thinking about like information bias, because people just read and read and read, and that's the biggest problem with the algorithm, for example, in a Facebook or in Instagram, that they will feed you even more of the stuff you already know and you already like, and you confirm it. That's the thing.
Confirmation bias. So then, So the algorithm knows what you interact with. So if you're interacting with content that is leaning a particular way or has a certain bias, the algorithm is going to show you more of that stuff, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. And that's why it's so addictive, because you confirm what you know, what you believe, what you think of a specific topic, and you get more and more and more and more
And
of
you're like,
it.
hey, I'm smart. I'm the smartest. I'm
Exactly. And that's also a biggest problem, like not the biggest, but one of biggest challenges, to understand or to catch up yourself that, whoa, I'm not smart. There are a lot of different opinions and a lot of different concepts and a lot of different people out there, and somehow it's important, at least to try to get like the fuller picture of a situation or of, of the subject we're talking about.
So how do you think people can kind of like challenge their bias? Not like challenge in this like the way we think about this demonstrative like battle or whatever, but just like how can someone be more open-minded to learning other perspectives or other philosophies in the world?
Um, to my mind, the first thing would be get and give constructive feedback. The second would be learn about uncomfortable things and things that don't support your beliefs and don't support something that you already know.
Yeah.
It's very tough. It's very difficult because on a specific point you don't want to do it. It's unwanted action, like why you have to destroy something that you are comfortable with.
Yeah.
But it's essential to avoid some, not irrationality, but to avoid some bigger issues that can come up without like thinking about confirmation bias. So yeah, that's I guess two essential things: constructive feedback and learn a bit more about uncomfortable things that are out there that don't support you.
As a data scientist, do you think that people make decisions more by data or emotions, like rationality or emotions?
I would say people are irrational like 90% of the time, and me as well. And I guess it's pretty crucial to to think about just to remind yourself about this irrationality, that you are irrational. People are emotion driven, not data driven. Like, I mean, there are some of them out there, but like, to remind 90% of the people are really emotion driven. And yeah, that's
So you have to have like a
something.
higher order value system within yourself to understand, okay,
Exactly.
pull yourself out of the situation emotionally, look at it rationally, look at data, be objective about the data you're being presented with, and then make a decision that way.
Exactly. As I've mentioned, it shouldn't be like in your everyday life on every step. But if we're talking about some really big, complex questions or topics, it's very important to add some rationality to your judgments. Somehow provide this mechanism of developing this, rational thinking process.
Yeah.
That's and that's what bias can teach you. Like if you read about it, and if you learn about it a bit more in a statistical way, you can easily transfer it to your everyday life, because bias, it's a pretty statistical concept, but it can be transferred like literally without any problems on your everyday life. As I've mentioned, like there are plenty of things. Also, it's a big thing, I guess, in psychology and in all natural science, but basically that's a statistical concept.
Nice. So if people want to learn more about all these biases, you can check out his article. It's very in-depth. I want to take this now into a different direction. How can someone use data and statistics to be more creative?
Basically, it's, I guess, the most beautiful part of statistics and all this data processes is storytelling. And without the storytelling, it's just pure numbers and some, I don't know, some data out there, but the most important part is a storytelling. What you want to do with this data? What is your end goal? What do you want to achieve? And with the storytelling, you can make people's, let's say, narratives like way fuller. If we're talking about creativity, for me, it's like, kind of superpower. That's what differentiates us from, I don't know, robots or AI. And data and statistics can be used as a navigator, as a compass, as a GPS. Let's say you want to, I don't know, to write a song or to write a picture on a canvas, for example. Then you can definitely look for some historical data, to get this deeper knowledge about like some historical cycles of civilization development, recognize some patterns. And because like history is in cycles, the history repeats, and that's the way you can not predict the future, but be able to understand what's coming up next. Combine it with storytelling, and creators can be also data driven, let's say, in kind of way. For me, for example, if we're talking about creativity, it's also about finding your audience. And let's say creators can see the audience in a more magical way than ever before, just because you have so much data. For example, all this podcast analytics or YouTube analytics or Instagram dashboard analytics, whatever. You can see exactly what kind of people are on your profile. What do they like? What do they don't like? What kind of posts are the most valuable for them? And that's also something that you can, add to this power of storytelling and this creative way of thinking. And that's how you can use data and statistics to be more creative. I mean, yeah.
Awesome. How is data used in machine learning? Like, can you explain machine learning a little bit more for me?
Yeah, sure. Basically, if we're talking about like the steps of machine learning, I would say there are 4 crucial steps in the easiest words. The first one is to find the data. No, like the first one, set a goal, why you need it. Like, what is your goal? Because it's like very cost intensive process and task. If we're talking in terms of some, business implementations, find your goal. Why do you need it? Why it will help you? Will it increase your revenue, or I don't know, save some money? Define it. Find the data, require data, aggregate it if you need it. Like, it's also very difficult part, but to be honest. Then when you have this data, you prepare, you clean this data, because the data in the outer world is very dirty per definition. Like, there are some missing values, there are some extremas, you have to clean it. That's where happens a lot of statistics and math. Then you get this data and build a model with it. You train a model, and model is also a lot of statistics. Basically, it's just pure statistics and math. Train a model, build a model, and deploy the model to the production. And then when you have more data, you build these data pipelines, you feed the data to the model, and the model gets better and better and better and better in prediction. That's that's, I guess, the easiest way of explaining it. Like, what is machine learning?
So you mentioned dirty data and cleaning data. What exactly do you mean by that?
Let's say, like in a data preparation steps, you cannot feed a model with a dirty data.
Here,
and
go a little farther from your mic a little bit.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
They're perfect. Here, I'll ask the question again. So you mentioned dirty data and cleaning data. What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. So when we're talking about dirty data, there are a lot of, for example, missing values. Let's say you filling up the survey for a company, and then there are some unwanted questions you don't want to answer. Then you just skip them, let them empty. For the company, that's missing values that should be cleaned, or that should be fulfilled with some statistical concepts of replacing data based on the averages or on the mean values or whatever. And that's how dirty data becomes clean data. And only with a clean data you can feed the model and train the model and build a model, because otherwise the model will be very biased and will give you result that you don't want to see, definitely. Like, for 100% not in a business, not in a, business environment.
Do you have any recent examples of dirty data you had to clean?
That's a crucial step every time you try to build a machine learning model. And I've did it like many times for my personal projects, not as a data scientist where I'm working right now, because I have pretty specific scope of tasks, what I'm working on. And it involves more about data engineering, like building pipelines and databases and stuff like that. But one day I'll build a great machine learning model and deploy it into production for sure.
Nice. So question I have for you, I noticed in your article, I feel like you might have mentioned it before, but like, is Nietzsche an influence of yours? Nietzsche?
Sorry?
Is the philosopher Nietzsche an influence of yours?
That's a good question. Yes and no.
Okay.
I can explain you. When I was an adult, so way younger, I guess 14, 15, 16 years old, for me somehow it was interesting to learn about these philosophical schools of that time. Okay. Different works of great philosophers out there, and I was somehow inspired about this complex and complicated literature people were writing. And I've read couple of books of Nietzsche, like, and for me, as a, this youthful maximalism, um, this idea of a Superman inspired me somehow a lot. A person, or like, creature who lived like beyond any conventional categories, including like, religion, human hobbies, and stuff like that. And I was like, whoa, that's inspiring. And it was very complicated to read it. Also, I'm for example, I'm non-religious person. So my parents are religious and my grandparents are very religious, but somehow I didn't catch it in my younger age. And yeah, I don't believe in God, so I'm atheist. And that's a good example, for example, of confirmation bias. Like, I was reading Nietzsche, and he declines the God because he was talking literally that people kill the God and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And for me, like, oh, interesting. Like he declines the idea of a God or religion as it is, like Christianity. And yeah, I confirmed my not beliefs, but what I felt at the time.
So you were reading this literature and you're like, oh, someone who's talking about these other things that I like thought this about God, when it was hard to find
the proper words.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Right now, I'm not really sure, and I didn't read a lot about like philosophy or different philosophical schools since a long time. But that's why I've said so yes and no, because yes, it was when I was 15, and no right now because I know what is confirmation bias. No.
Yeah. But you're reading Nietzsche at age 15?
As I've mentioned, for me, it was interesting to read these complicated sentences, and just reading them 4 times just to get an idea what the hell are you talking about.
Yeah.
And I can imagine if I'll read it right now, I will have to read it like 5 times more to get more or less the idea of what's happening in there.
Explain this idea of the Superman that Nietzsche has.
Sorry?
Explain this idea of the Superman that Nietzsche has.
Briefly, what I remember, the idea that people kill the god. I guess Nietzsche was a bit crazy, like per definition crazy, and people kill the god, and there is no Christianity as it is, and there is a Superman who has like way higher values and way higher standards and things beyond all these, standard categories that normal people think of, like hobbies and some sports, drinking, parties, whatever. And yeah, somehow it reflected in me more or less. But yeah, that's the main idea, that there's something bigger than
all these
God.
hobbies and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
As the person who just took up a new hobby of fencing.
Exactly. Yeah. that's life. I mean,
so who are some like 2 other intellectual influences of yours?
I would say Walter Lewin. Have you ever heard about it?
No, I haven't.
Okay. It's an astrophysicist. I guess he is from Netherlands. I'm not sure. And for me, if we're talking about him, that's how teaching at the universities or any other organizations should be done in the right way. Like explain such complex topics in physics and in astrophysics in such a childish, very primitive way, so everyone understands, even if you have no idea of physics or like, you know, thermodynamics or whatever. That's inspiring. That's definitely something that influenced me a lot during my school time, and that I've watched probably all the lectures of him on the internet
Really?
in my free time. Yeah. Give it a look. Give it a look. It's wonderful.
Is he still alive?
I think so. I think so. He doesn't teach anymore, but I guess he is still alive.
Wow. Nice.
And the second one, probably it's also, yeah, a bit, you know, trivial. It's definitely Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. Interesting.
And he has, not as a, yes, not as a technical person, but as an individual with all this visionary stuff in him. So all his ideas, vision, his way of thinking somehow inspired me. And there are a lot of things that I'm really excited about. Like, for example, once he said that sometimes you have to show people that you have to show them the product, because people cannot, they don't know what they want and what they are capable of, and you have to show them something in order to open their eyes. Whoa, you can do it different, you know. That's how iPhone took the place and became like one of the most, probably the most popular like phone out there.
Yeah.
It's for me, it's impressive. I mean, that's you can be so visionary and like see the future and do something for it, you know, starting very small in his garage somewhere out there in California, I guess, and like dreaming really big, too big, I would say.
Interesting. You read any books about him?
Not yet.
You should pick up right here. We got the Walter Isaacson biography.
Sorry?
The Walter Isaacson biography right here.
Okay.
Should check that one out. Walter Isaacson does a lot of good biographies. I have let's see. I got Ben Franklin and Da Vinci and Einstein. So Walter Isaacson is like, to me, like the premier biographer of like just like genius level people. So if you do read a book on Steve Jobs, I would recommend the Walter Isaacson one.
I'll definitely give it a try. Steve Isaacson. Huh.
Walter Isaacson.
Oh yeah, Walter Isaacson. Yeah, about Steve Jobs. Yeah.
Interesting. So this is something we talked about last episode. I don't know if you've done any research on it, but is there a difference in like data collection in the United States versus Germany?
I did like very small, like 10 minutes research, just, you know, to find the right words.
Okay.
And the rest will be like from my perspective, from my eyes, how I see it and how I feel it, because I have some American friends in here, and I've heard like some stories about like all this let's say data privacy topics in the United States. So wait,
he's drinking his water. He's getting ready to say something profound.
Yeah. So if we are talking about data collection in the United States and in Germany, I would say that Germany is way more advanced, and in general, European Union way more advanced in terms of data privacy, data security, data processing, and stuff like that. So basically, for businesses, there are plenty of legal requirements, like very strict, like, cookies policy, secure transactions on all the levels, like
This is Europe right now you're talking about?
Sorry?
This is Europe you're talking about right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
Europe, exactly. And very strict laws for data saving, data processing. I mean, there is such a thing as GDPR. It's very popular. I guess everyone in Germany knows about it. It's General Data Protection Regulation. Since 2016, it came up. And basically, there are that's the main law about data privacy in Germany. There are different concepts of and different states that are in this law, but the main are I've written them. It's that's lawfulness, fairness, and transparency, purpose limitation, data minimalization, accuracy, storage limitation. That's the most important part, that you cannot store data for, I don't know, for 100 years of a person. It can be stored I think not more than 10 years or 5 years or something, then it should be deleted. And if you don't do this, that's bad for you, definitely. Data security and accountability. That's like the most important state of this law. You can read about it, of this regulation. And if we are talking about Germany and German data collection, I guess it has to do a lot with, because I'm by birth from Belarus, and my grandparents have seen they were child, like the Second World War and all this Nazi regime and Stasi, and it's kind of common topic here in Europe. And that's also something that influenced data privacy and data collection in Germany, especially. So Stasi is Germany secret police that were looking for people, and there were some specific agents who were literally tracking people's movement. Okay, this time he went out of his home, this time he came back, this time he eats, this time he sleeps, this time he, I don't know, reads a newspaper. And I guess in Germany it was like one agent per 160 or 66 citizens in the East Germany. Yes, that's crazy. And that's a horrible number, actually. The horrible ratio, 1 to 166. So, and there is a very good movie. I really highly recommend you. One of my favorite documentary movies, The Life of Others. Amazing. Just give it a look, and you will, and I guess with this movie you will understand why Germany is so advanced in terms of data privacy and data security. It gives you really a nice overview of what happened in this Stasi times and Nazi regime and stuff like that. And after that you understand why it's so strict and so advanced right now in Germany. So yeah.
Interesting. So this is also an example of using historical data to make new judgments or decisions for the future, right?
Exactly. There are also some statistics, to my mind, that in a Nazi regime, people not people, but Nazi officers and other Nazis exploited like private official registers of a people in order to send Jews to concentration camps. So basically, they revealed all the data they had for all the citizens, and just in order to kill a number of people. It's crazy, and that's also where we are talking about historical data and why it's important and how you can draw some conclusions. And if you are a creator, you can definitely be way more creative if you know these facts and you know these statistics and data. Yeah. I forgot to mention about the United States, and for me it's a bit difficult to sum up everything, but I would say that in the the United States seems way more concerned with the integrity of data as a commercial asset, just in business terms.
Yeah.
While the European Union, with its data regulations, has firmly put individual rights before the interests of any kind of business.
Interesting.
And that's the biggest differentiation for me. And that's what we were talking about like on the last episode. And yeah, the biggest difference in my eyes. I mean, probably there are some of them.
So when we're talking about commercial assets, like the data is looked at as commercial assets, like thinking like how far is where's the line as far as like data goes of
I guess
too personal or too, I don't know.
I guess I know what you mean. So in like it's the matter of definition, like what is personal data. And personal data is nothing else as your birth date, for example, your name, your surname, your occupation, like everything that belongs to you and only to you, and it should be only like your something that really yours. For example, if we take like an example of non-personal data is, I don't know, if you take a humidity sensor connected to the computer and send the data from the sensor to, I don't know, to kind of hub somewhere in the cloud, that's non-personal data. That's something that, just sensor. And for example, I'm pretty sure this GDPR regulation is not cannot be applied to this kind of non-personal data. But if a company retrieves your data, and that's where we're talking about all this social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever, where you put your personal data, your videos, your face, your, I don't know, your messages, that's also your personal data. And it's absolutely prohibited to track it here. Like it's so strict with it.
But in the United States, it's completely open.
That's where we're talking about commercial assets. Somehow, a good friend of mine told me like that really insane. Once you are talking about I don't know, that you came up with the idea to paint something, and you need like canvas, oils, and some brushes. 20 minutes later, you get perfect advertisement on a Facebook that you get brushes, canvas, and oil, like 20% sale. That's crazy, huh? That's the type almost didn't experience here, like in Germany.
So you don't get it. Like there have been times where you're having a conversation with somebody without, you're not typing it on Instagram, or you're saying it, and then all of a sudden an ad shows up somewhere. And you're like,
Sometimes,
whoa.
sometimes it came up, but I tried to use, secure messengers, like for example the Telegram, and the wasn't, I guess, a single case where they revealed, like, personal data such as messages, or I don't know, some personal information. And yeah, after my university, I'll delete WhatsApp, for example, just because of data privacy. I don't want to get any advertisement, or like I don't want to know that I don't want to share my data, like that I'm came up with the idea to draw something with a Facebook. I don't want to do it. And for me, it's something that really, like, crucial, like it's important, very important. And that's, I guess, the biggest difference. Like there are individual rights here, and there's more commercial assets and use in the United States.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks for answering that. Something I'm curious about is what do you think the best airport is in your experience in the world?
I can tell you that all the airports I've been traveling a lot recently.
Like, what's the best airport you've experienced?
Yeah, I would say in Amsterdam. Schiphol, I guess. I still cannot pronounce it because it's pretty complicated. Schiphol, I guess. That's one of the most one of the most beautiful and well infrastructured airports I've ever seen. It's huge. It's really immense. And I'm really excited about all these airport management systems, like about the luggage and departures, arrivals, like all these ways of transferring people from A to B, from B to C, and how they organize it on this scale. And for me, for such a big airport, it's very clean and it's very tidy. I've never seen like such a big airport. I've seen smaller airports way more dirty. And for me, it was impressive, like how much cleaning service was put in there. That's something I was like, whoa, that's cool. Yeah.
So the Amsterdam airport, interesting. Yeah, I feel like that would be a pretty good one. There's Amsterdam. If you look at also like the history of Amsterdam, it makes a lot of sense because there's so much commerce and so much coming through that hub. So when you're at airports, what do you notice most?
In the airport, for me, in the first place, I've been to Turkey 2 months ago. And for me, for example, one of the most important things in an airport are sitting places, like, some banks where people just can sit and wait for departure. That's something that a lot in Amsterdam and in Turkey, in Antalya, as well as in Istanbul. There are, I don't know, 5 banks for all these massive people coming from all the sides. Literally, people are staying like as in, I don't know, in a bus or somewhere. That's.
So you're saying you notice like waiting areas and
yes,
like how much room. Okay.
Exactly. Space is the most important thing for me, and how I should feel myself comfortable, just waiting for my plane, because somehow I just prefer to set, pre-deadlines. And if I know that I have to be like 2 hours before the departure in the airport, I take like half an hour, like in advance, and I want to sit and wait like in a comfortable space. It shouldn't be like, luxury or something. It should be just on a people level, understanding, like comfortable,
Yeah.
That's for
Yeah.
me the most important part.
It's interesting. The last airport I went through was LaGuardia, and LaGuardia, in my experience, has been a dump. It's been terrible. And this last time I went, though, they finished the terminal, one of the terminals. So they're reconstructing it. And I was visiting my friend in Brooklyn, and I'm like, oh, I went to the new Apple store. And he's like, oh, here in Brooklyn. I'm like, no, LaGuardia. It's like an Apple store. Everything is like new and beautiful and like designed very well. And I notice in airports too, there's more it's like catching up to today's needs as far as outlets, USB ports, charging, Wi-Fi. It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That, for example, that's one of the most terrible airports I've ever seen were in Turkey. There is no internet in there. Can you imagine this?
Huh.
I mean, there is.
Yeah.
We're not talking about charges and Wi-Fi and USB supply, some power supply. No, there is no basic internet. If you want internet, you have to pay. And if you want to pay, you have to find a spot where you can pay. Otherwise, it's not everywhere. There are like, I guess, in the whole airport, like 3 spots or 4 spots where you can pay for the internet. And it's still problematic because you have to have lira, like their currency, to pay. So horrible.
Interesting.
I mean, that's something that should be, per definition in the airport, like for communication, for, spending some time.
Like, yeah, everybody spends, so many people spend time on the internet in this digital space. I would imagine you would want to make it easiest for people to still access that while they're in your travel hub. Yeah,
exactly. And I was traveling alone, for example, and if I would have been with my friend, it wouldn't have been a big problem. But I was alone, and I had to wait, I guess, 4 hours or something. It was horrible. I had no books with me. I had nothing. I just was like walking around, and there were no seating places, like literally just a few. That's a dump.
Interesting. I love this. It's one of the things I'm most curious about is hearing people's opinions of airports. Because I think an airport is a great way. It's a great impression of a region or a city right away. In all the things that you've mentioned, but also like how they decorate it, what they kind of like showcase. Like here in Chicago, the design at O'Hare in like the terminals, it's very industrial looking, which is like it goes with the like kind of philosophy of Chicago, like big city of shoulders. We're like tough, hardworking people. Like new, like building. We're always building and constructing. And also you have like there's this like model of a dinosaur with like the field museum, and then like all the
I've seen it.
Yeah, like there's all these, you're like pushing the local culture within the airport because people are there, so they get an impression of it. Like Copenhagen was a really interesting one to me because it's kind of how I pictured the like folklore and fairy tales and the woods, and there's like all these intricate like wood carvings and also it was yeah, Copenhagen, it looks like an IKEA. It looks like IKEA a little bit. all the furniture, everything like makes an impression. And I think it's interesting how people, when discussing airports, they have different priorities in their heads. And it's definitely incredible to think about how much movement there is in a space, how it's organized, and like how do you make everything so efficient and appeasable to like 21st century citizens of the world, you know? It's interesting.
Exactly. That's like the most, no, I would say the most important part for me. Um, how, like, depending on the size of the airport, how are the processes organized? And for me, for example, that the biggest, like, the most impressive thing in Amsterdam was because it's huge international
Yeah.
airport.
Huge.
And everything was so well designed in terms of the processes. Like there were no delays, like at least on our gates and gates like close to ours. Luggage arrived on time, everything was smoothly and perfect. So that's, for me, that's the biggest, the most important indicator of what airport is about. And
I feel like maybe this is selection bias or maybe a bias in here, but recently I feel like I haven't had to experience, or I haven't experienced delays of any sort. If anything, it's usually early for the flights I've taken, or what I've noticed with other when waiting and like looking at the signs and stuff like that. I don't see as many delays as I used to.
that's what I've seen a lot in Turkey. That's what I've seen really a lot in Turkey.
Like
Like,
delays.
yeah, a lot.
Interesting.
Just because, to my mind, the processes weren't organized that well. And it's also an international airport that combines, the eastern part of Asia and Asia as well, like in general,
Yeah.
with Africa, with Europe, with Russia. Like it's basically in the center between all these four
These
different parts.
continents. Yeah.
How the hell there can be no internet, or you have to wait like so much time to get on board? That's for me anti-top two airports on my list are
Yeah.
definitely in Turkey.
That's it.
Antalya and Istanbul.
That's interesting. I feel like our next episode, we should explore the movement of people and how we can use data to better move people around cities and the world.
Of course, sure.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, I have one last question, and that's, what are you curious about recently?
To be honest, I had to work a lot recently, and I was traveling a lot recently because I visited my parents in Turkey, and that not that much that I've been curious about. I was thinking about humanity, that humanity is, entering the adulthood, that there are way more older people than younger people, and somehow that I came to the conclusion that it will have an enormous, economical, geopolitical influence. Also, that we have to give way more birth to children, because otherwise we will die out on a
This book, I think the biggest threat to America's future is underpopulation.
Underpopulation, that's the perfect word for
and
it. Yeah.
So this book I'm reading, I'm sure listeners and viewers will have content on this. Our friend Sunchit Arvind, he's going to be on the podcast. He's reading this book too. And it's basically about like how it's a simple math problem that America needs to have more people. And so like solving these problems, it's like, it's long-term thinking, but it needs to be kind of addressed now. And it's a super fascinating book. So I'm right there with you. It's like, yeah, underpopulation.
Absolutely. And that was what I've been curious about recently, and all this, let's say, all these middle class, rich, poor classes, like the distribution of people, like between all these classes. And yeah, I didn't have that much time to spend on researching and reading, but that's something I've been curious about recently, and that's something I will definitely dive deeper into.
Yeah. So you see this issue too. You're looking at these numbers.
Of course. I mean, for me, even in my country, in Belarus, that's one of the biggest issues, that underpopulation is here. It's not something that we've came up with. It's something that's real, very real, based on numbers and math. And the second point is, people are leaving the country. As me, for example, and as many of us, people are leaving the country. And I guess only in last year, we're in Belarus, we were 9.5 billion people 5-6 years ago, almost 10 million people in Belarus. Only last year, over 300,000 people immigrated to other countries.
Wow, that's a lot.
300,000 people. And that people are immigrated, that's confirmed cases. How many people just left their houses and gone?
Interesting.
That's something that's humanity is entering the adulthood for sure, and underpopulation is a big topic to discuss.
It sounds like another episode topic.
Of course, sure.
Awesome. Well, Vlad, it's been great having you on again. I love these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.